our voices, our views. This is Politics in Black. What's happening, family? We are back and we are live on Politics in Black. Once again, after a month hiatus, brought to you once again by the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants, Los Angeles. Los Angeles. We'll go with that today. Thank you for coming back with us, fam. Sticking with us. We took a month off. A lot has happened in that month, so we got a lot to talk about here. But before we do that, if it's your first time here, you know how I say all the time, my name is Chad Brown. I'm only one half of the hosting team. Sitting across from me, you know her, you love her. She's on the ground fighting for you. Friday Jones. Friday, say what's up.
What's up, everybody? Look, we have an exciting show today. Absolutely. Chad and I have been psyched as we have been putting it together. I want to shout out Dana and Tiffany and Marcus and the poetess and Lori, our whole production team that really makes sure that we get things done right. So let's
get into it. Let's go. Get into it. So the title of this show today, this broadcast is Black Wealth and Natural Disasters. And as the family knows, about 4 weeks ago, we had a devastating Hurricane Ida, hit our family in the South, throughout the Southeast, throughout the Northeast, and just wreaked havoc in its wake. And we've got a lot of the family that's still dealing with some really harsh conditions, no clean water, no electricity, recovery has been slow. So we wanted to come today and we wanted to have a conversation about how these natural disasters impact wealth in our community, because we're focused on the racial wealth gap.
The racial wealth gap is significant. Absolutely. And with these structural harms, it's hard to get away from it, and even in a disaster it shows its face.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, Friday, one of the things that inspired me though is the family comes together after these things happen, right? And so I'll call out the brothers that be the power. I want to give a shout out to them because they greatly influenced this show with that show they did where they raised funds for residents in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. And that's the spirit of mutual aid. And we are all about collective. We are all about family here. And so we want to do our part today in the spirit of mutual aid on this show. So I think we got a special announcement we want to make about what's going on here, right?
What are you talking about?
Somebody told me it was okay. I thought we had a surprise.
Oh, whoa, that surprise. Okay, I'm sorry, you guys. Look, I had COVID. My brain's a little foggy. Anyway, look, no, seriously, for today's show, all of your contributions and donations, usually we pay to keep the lights on, but we have 3 great organizations that are going to be here with us today, representatives that are going to be here with us today, and we want to make sure that we're doing our job and living in our purpose and giving back. So that's right. The big announcement. That's right. So be generous in your giving as you can. All donations today, fam, once again, will be going directly to hurricane recovery and relief efforts on the ground at the grassroots in Louisiana with some of the guests that you're going to see here today. So once again, reach in your pockets, do what you can. We're all about, again, mutual aid and helping the family, and that's exactly what we're going to do here today. Look, I want to bring in somebody we know. Like, I know Lionel. He is on Twitter. He's one of our brothers.
He's a soldier.
He drops those Louisiana recipes, something that I ain't never heard of. He had baked spaghetti on. And so he's part of us. We know him. He's here with us today, a resident of LaPlace St. John the Baptist Parish in Louisiana, reparations advocate, and a Hurricane Ida survivor. We want to welcome Lionel Riley to the show today.
Lionel, welcome to Politics in Black, brother. Good to have you.
Hey, what's going on, guys? How y'all doing?
Good to have you. And so before we get started, I'm going to bring in the second member of this panel, our first segment here. Her name is Lakita Smith. She's an advocate, an author, and an entrepreneur, and a New Orleans native, so NOLA. And she's a graduate of Loyola University in New Orleans. Lakita works as an active member with organizations such as Vote NOLA, The Promise of Justice, the East Baton Rouge Parish Prison Reform Coalition, the Junior League of Baton Rouge, and she is active in efforts to put an end to new Jim Crow laws across the state of Louisiana. She currently serves as the chairwoman of professional development for the Urban League of Louisiana Young Professionals. As the co-founder or founder of Alabem Bella La Femme, sorry, my Creole's
I
gotta get my French up. Bella La Femme Society, ABLS. As the leader of that organization, she provides resources and funding to nearly 300 minority members of the community, locally and nationally. And we wanted to talk to Lakita today because she's been on the front lines after Hurricane Ida, providing mental, physical, and financial recovery and support to the residents of New Orleans that have been impacted. So welcome to Politics in Black, Lakita Smith.
Thank you.
Sister, thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. So we're gonna hop right in with you two because you guys are on the ground. Lionel, I wanted to start with you because you just told us you just got back home. So tell us what it's been like for you over the past month in the wake of Hurricane Ida. What have you been dealing with, brother?
Oh man, it's been real stressful, man. A lot of families, friends, neighbors lost a lot of their homes due to Hurricane Ida. I could take you all the way back to prior that Friday, those 2 days leading prior to Ida was hitting that Sunday. Friday, I got to work. A lot of my job, they were like, okay, there's a storm coming. People wasn't worried much about it. When they said that it was about to hit the Gulf. If you're from the Gulf Coast, you're from New Orleans, you're from the surrounding areas, everybody knows if the Gulf is hot. You see, like, if it's like in the hundreds, which it was, we know that it's like a magnet. Hurricanes is coming at you. So by Saturday, my job had called in and say, look, you can't come in. It's Category 3. By the time it'll hit around maybe 3 or to 7 o'clock that Saturday. So I remember that Saturday packing my bags. My mother, I went to my sister's because she said it's on higher ground. So by that Saturday night, we were just waiting for what to come in. By Sunday, around like 5:30 that morning, kind of remind me of Katrina, same time I woke up, wind hit the side of the house, the window. It startled me, got up. By the time I got put on, fix some breakfast, wash my face, I get outside. Winds, they're ripping through the area. About like 1 o'clock, lights went out. When then from around, I believe it was about like 2 o'clock. That's when you start seeing the rain, the wind, and everything. And then about like 3 and 4:30, that's when we starting to see it. The rain, the hurricane just about hitting land. And I'm gonna tell you, this was one of the most scariest storms. I witnessed Katrina. I was 13, and as an adult now, I'm starting to see what it was. Some even say that Hurricane Katrina and Ida was even equivalent to each other. And I live in a town called La Place. We got a lot of the impact of the storm compared to other areas. So this area was really hard and affected by Hurricane Ida. So during the midst of the storm, what people and I reporting back that we seen numerous of tornadoes. So speaking with family and friends, they said at least about they're seeing 18 tornadoes hitting one area. No one's not telling about that. So we're seeing, like, I remember seeing a tornado. My family closed the door, took for cover. We seen it coming at us. So when we seen that, we started seeing flooding. My sister, we were parking our cars on higher ground. Water was gushing into the streets. We started to see the winds was picking up. It was gotten so bad we couldn't even see who was outside. It looked like someone stuck a white sheet over your face. That's how it was terrible. The next day, flooding. It looked like a bomb just hit my town and the surrounding areas. By the second day, that's when it's starting to get hot. And the heat was like excruciating. I remember Katrina, the heat was bad. This was also equivalent to Katrina. The heat was real bad.
And it's no power, so you don't have AC.
No, man, no power at all.
Yeah.
We had so my mom, my sister, and everybody was like, what are we gonna do? So my family has land up there in Ethel, Louisiana, East Feliciana, and my dad has a house in Baker, Louisiana. So we drove all the way to Baker and Ethel, Louisiana, where my dad's mother's side of the family is from. So we went there. So I've been there since for a whole month, and people were filing for FEMA applications.
Yeah, I
couldn't even file for it. So like individuals can't file for it. It's just for per household. So so my mom filed. We got FEMA. We were one of the lucky ones to get it. I know people like my cousin's baby father. His apartment complex caught on fire. FEMA denied him instantly, right then and there. So people have been waiting for their FEMA. A lot of people don't know how they're going to rebuild. Some people who moved here, because this is like the suburbs of New Orleans. So a lot of people from the city migrated here. Then we experienced Hurricane Isaac back in 2012. So, and Ida came. So this is the third time for some people had to rebuild.
Yeah, no chance to recover and just getting hit repeatedly.
Right. So
Lionel, I want to stick a pin in FEMA because I want to get there. I want to get there because we got Lakita on here too, who got some firsthand knowledge. So just real quick, Lakita, you heard Lionel's kind of his report of what has happened personally to him and his family. I know you're working with other residents there locally and helping them with assistance. Is that consistent with what you're hearing? Because you're working primarily with Black folks, with our community, right? Is that consistent what you're hearing from Lionel?
Absolutely. I just wanted to say, Lionel, my heart and my prayers go out to you and your family. And so, yeah, that's pretty much is what is happening and what is going on. Even though that was 3 weeks ago, we're starting to see an increase in improvements with a lot of the efforts that FEMA is doing, reaching families and making sure, because we have organizations such as Bella Love Society that is staying connected, making sure that the work is done and that the funds are being given to the community members, especially those who are impacted the most, like your region and your part of LaPlace. And so do you have lights? I mean, because I know LaPlace was hit so hard right now. Are you able to be back in your home, or you're just somewhere else in that area?
I'm home.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm home. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So Lakita, so you're actually on the ground and you're assisting folks with the FEMA process. And one of the things that brought you to my attention is you were talking about the numbers of applications, the sheer volume of applications that you're seeing come in, and then a large majority of those, it sounded like, were getting either denied or delayed for various reasons. So I wanted to get your experience with FEMA and being in that process and how our folks, how the family can prepare and if they're able to access FEMA dollars. Because I heard you say it's getting a little better, but talk to us a little bit about that process.
So let me just tell you how it all started.
Okay.
First of all, the hurricane hit on my 40th birthday. So I was like, there's absolutely no way I'm not going to get involved in recovery and response efforts, right? So pretty much what is happening is you have a lot of individuals that are experiencing the same thing with FEMA for as the verification process.
Okay.
So many people are being told that their ID doesn't match their social security numbers, and then also as well as verification for as addresses. So that was a huge thing, and we're talking about like over 90,000 people out of 400 and like 64,000 people that actually applied in the first few days of the aftermath of Hurricane Ida. So that was what was happening. Then you had a large portion of people that actually, I think it was like 197,000 at that time. We're talking 3 weeks ago, like I said, that was denied coverage because of several different reasons. It was so many things that was going on.
Let me stop you right there, because I want to hear about some of those reasons why people are being denied. What is FEMA telling folks why they can't get any sort of relief or recovery assistance?
Okay, so a lot of people didn't understand FEMA services and how FEMA is not the first line of contact, the first line of, recovery. If you have insurance, you were supposed to contact your insurance provider, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's rental or homeowners insurance, negotiate your terms or your policy, whatever is going on, see what you're going to be afforded, and then FEMA comes in as a second step so that they can provide that gap in coverage so that you can begin your recovery process or whatever it is, if it's long-term, assistance with housing, temporary housing, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
And even sadly to say, even funeral costs, and a lot of people wasn't doing it. They was just jumping on the phone, calling FEMA first. And so if you have insurance, then you can't, FEMA's rules and regulations is that they won't pay double if you have coverage. Now, if you don't have coverage, then that's a different story. But that wasn't initially what FEMA was seeing at first with applicants. And so that's why the numbers got much better during the course of this duration.
Can you talk a little bit about how people can collect their records in a place other than their homes? Because I would imagine after a natural disaster, you when you apply, you're going to have to proof up. You talked about Social Security and numbers not matching and addresses. How can people build almost like some sort of off-site file cabinet so that in an emergency they can actually get to the things that they need?
I will just say this, being a resident of Louisiana, we already know that it's storm season. So I say, preparation, stand prepared, always being on top, making sure that, because right now we're living in a digital age. So everything is digital. So we really don't have any excuse. We can download all of these apps securely on our phones and make sure that we have all of our documentations ready to go. Even have a hurricane bag packed with all of your permanent information, and stay ready, like keep it in the trunk of your car. Even if you don't even have a vehicle, just keep something on you that if anything happens, then you can kind of navigate smoothly because you already have the documentations that's going to be required to render any type of aid.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, because I can imagine
Yeah,
now after something like this, your home is destroyed, or some sort
cars. You see cars, floating and submerged in water, and so the digital toolkit or digital, mailbox. I don't know what you call it, but that seems like a thing that we have to just do. I know we live in earthquake country, and as prepared as I am, I'm like, those papers are still papers.
I'm telling you.
They're not scanned anywhere, so I have to get on my job. After talking to you, Lakita, I want to ask you both about what is her name? Cottrell, the mayor of New Orleans, and she didn't right away declare an emergency evacuation in certain areas. She kind of did outside of the levee areas, and then after the governor declared a state of emergency, she came in, and I think that those kinds of decisions actually impact what insurance companies are and are not going to do. And so if you could just talk a little bit about how those emergency statuses or statutes that are given by the governor and local government actually affect people in their recovery process.
I can speak to that. Well, actually, what happens is if it's not declared emergency evacuation, then you may have some hardships trying to get that funding, because I know for certain insurance companies and as well as FEMA that that's a barrier, and that's what they were telling a lot of the evacuees when it was pending on hotel accommodations. And so I thought that was insane to say, okay, yeah, it wasn't a mandatory evacuation. So FEMA was pretty much denying lodging assistance for people who were actually stranded and running from, the storm. And so that is definitely a barrier, but they quickly, kind of navigated through that and understood that, hey, people need to leave. Rather, they feel though that it's a mandatory evacuation, but there's safety hazards, because you have people with, compromised immune systems and things of that nature. And so being without lights for 3 or 4 days, can be detrimental to their health.
In 100 degrees.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. Can we talk about Red Cross? Can we just parking lot and come back and talk about Red Cross and what they said and what they actually told me? We definitely have to talk about Red Cross.
Go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead, Lakita.
So
let's hear what. Yeah.
Look, let me just say, so Red Cross was actually telling individuals, and told it to me, that having air and lights was a luxury in
Wow.
Louisiana. When I finished with
Wow.
that lady, I'm gonna just say, when I
Wow.
finished with her, I had to make sure, because someone contacted me, and she was a mother of five and also pregnant with twins. And she contacted me. She was like, Lakita, listen, we have a situation with Red Cross, and I'm trying to go somewhere, and my apartment is hot. I'm like, what's going on? And so she said Red Cross denied me of lodging assistance or anything like that. And a lot of people pour into Red Cross. They'd be like one of the first lines of
Yeah.
defense
A first
with
line. Yeah.
response and everything.
Yes.
And people, had poured in big donations prior to even Hurricane Ida hitting.
Yes.
And yeah, they just taking the funds and I guess pay each other. However,
Wow.
you know, she was denied. So I called myself and I gave my address and I talked to him and everything. And about 2 days later, so understand I'm in limbo for 2 days, for their knowledge. And I was told the same thing and was denied any type of funding assistance, being though that air and lights is considered a luxury. And that woman said, ma'am, some people still don't have any lights. They live on a bayou. I said, didn't I tell you where I was from? I said, we don't do that. I ain't
Yeah.
asked you about the bayou. I'm talking about me.
Yeah.
And so that was the whole situation. And
That's
I could not believe that they done that. Yeah.
that's it.
So
That is
those are the
terrible.
type of barriers and hardships. And people don't have the fight in them. So much is happening. People don't have that resiliency because people are drained and tired and so many things are happening on top of the pandemic. So we have a whole situation on top of another one now, and we're trying to navigate through. And we still have regular life happening.
Lionel, can I ask you? Thank you for that, Lakita. Can I
Of
ask
course.
you? Was there a FEMA access point close to you, either on the higher ground that you went to, or in the northern part of Louisiana where your family was? Where were you able to actually access FEMA? Was it
It,
accessible to you?
well, it was through digital,
It was all
phone,
digital.
laptop. Yeah. So my family, like I said, we went to North Louisiana, which was not really affected. So I remember my sister applied for the SBA disaster loan. Well, she called in for the SBA disaster loan. Well, she'll try to apply on the website. Well, on the website, it listed New York, New Jersey as, because Ida, we remember seeing Ida swept through
Right.
the
Yeah.
East Coast.
Yep.
So with Louisiana, not even Mississippi wasn't even listed because coastal Mississippi was also damaged during Ida. So as my sister and my brother-in-law called, it sounded like a brother. It was a brother on the phone. So when they called, he was like, well, I don't see it listed, so I might have to navigate you guys through the website. So as they navigating through the website, he said, well, what are your officials, your state representative, what are they doing? They said, well, they're here. They was like, well, for what I'm seeing, they're saying they're not able to get into the state because of the disaster. My sister said, hold up, that's not true, because Baton Rouge, not too far where we're from, Baton Rouge had lights, they had AC, they had everything, all the government, state government buildings, and everything was all functioning. So he called in to see what was going on, called back my sister and said that, hey, can I be honest with you all? They was like, yeah. They were like, your officials is blocking you guys for access of any
Wow.
type of relief fund.
I
So
believe it. We all know Michael Johnson from Congress. We know his name. He's not. We're not fans.
Yeah.
so it's like disaster food stamps. I applied for unemployment. Certain companies, certain jobs were denying employees unemployment.
Uh-huh.
I got an unemployment, but it's not the money I make. It was like less than 100. So sometimes people were getting denied of, like I say, SNAP, food stamps. They were getting denied of, oh my gosh, just every
Just right and
funds and
left.
relief.
Yeah.
And also, if we could talk about how the gas was so bad here is that gas was gold. You know, people were trying lines. My dad even said it looked like the 70s when he was coming up. Lines stretched all the way into blocks and blocks upon blocks. You've seen people were harassed for trying to pump gas. They were, they had some, this is Louisiana. You deal with some, racist white folks and stuff. So they harassing black folks and other people to get off the, from the pumps and stuff. But it's just been, it's been hectic. I'm not gonna lie. People were hungry. They were starving. No water, and when we did get water, the water pressure was low. If you did still have water, it was contaminated for 3 weeks.
And all of this is still in the middle of a pandemic.
In the middle of COVID. Well, look, Lakita and Lionel, we need you two to connect with each other because I think your community, Lionel, could really benefit from working with Lakita. She's very hands-on, grounds-on. We thank you both for being here with us today in Politics in Black, because I think hearing it makes it more real from someone from people we know and we can trust. Social media.
Tell the family how they can get in touch with you. Lakita, we'll start with you.
So my personal Instagram is educated_Bella. Abella Film Society Instagram is ABL Society. You can find us on Facebook at Abella Film Society, and you can find me on Facebook at Lakita Marie Smith.
Okay, and thank you for the work. Thank you for the work that you're doing.
Yeah,
of course.
Amazing.
Thank you for having me.
Lionel, go ahead and hit the fam with your social media.
You can find me on Twitter at Lionel Riley 8. Backup account at Lionel Riley 12. Don't do too much Instagram, Facebook. Don't do too much, but you can hit me up at on Facebook. I'm Lionel Riley.
Okay.
It's easy to find me. You can find me anywhere. So yeah.
Well, we got you, fam, and we're gonna try to send some help your way following this show. So look out for us. We want to look out for you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, that's
thank
real.
you for that. Look, we're here to do the work. Again, donations for today's show are going to be going to our guests and their organizations and Lionel directly. So please be generous as you can today, because it's coming in and it's turning around and going right back out. We're going to go to commercial break. We'll be right back.
But
Thank you.
the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. And you just heard it. We're trying to help our family out. Hit the Cash App, hit the Venmo, NAASDLA. We'll be right back.
Yes, we here, beautiful Sacramento, California Capitol. We are here at the Capitol for hearings on our bill called the Upward Mobility Act of 2021. Now, what's important for us about this bill is that also included in the bill is language that Coalition for a Just and Equitable California, CJEC, actually authored that would, for the first time ever, make California break down the data it collects for its black population by lineage. We need to talk about specifically blacks from the USA, right? Blacks who descend from U.S. slavery. Make sure we're getting good, clear data on the specific needs of our community, so that way we can design good, effective strategies to get good and effective outcomes, right? So, Gavin Newsom, if you're watching, because I know you are, okay, sign AB 105 into law today, okay, today. All right, get the...
What's happening, fam? We back, and if you saw that, that's an important piece of legislation, AB 105. We have language in that bill that is going to disaggregate data collection specifically for our group across all statewide agencies, boards, and commissions. So that bill is on the governor's desk right now, and we need the fam to show up.
Yeah,
call
we
him,
need you to call him, tell him to sign
105.
that bill. Absolutely. So look, this part of the show is about disaster relief and legislation and how those things go together. And so I want to bring in our first guest, Chauncia Willis. She is the co-founder and CEO of the Institute for Diversity and Inclusion in Emergency Management, IDIEM. Chauncia Willis is an emergency management and cultural diversity expert. Ms. Willis has been an outspoken advocate for building for building a more culturally diverse and inclusive emergency management workforce, one that represents the diverse communities as served. So welcome, Ms. Chauncey Willis.
Thank you.
Welcome,
So
Chauncey.
happy to be here.
Welcome
How
to
you
Politics
doing?
in Black.
Good.
Good to have you. And
Thank
on this
you.
panel with you, we've got one of your good friends, I understand, Ms.
Yes.
Jania Howell, who is a visiting assistant professor at the University of Illinois, Chicago in the sociology department. And Ms. Howell is an urban sociologist and race scholar who uses quantitative and qualitative tools to identify and dismantle the specific policies, processes, and practices that uphold white supremacy. Currently, her work focuses on policies, processes, and practices within the housing appraisals industry, disaster relief, and empirical methodologies. Her work has been published in over a dozen academic journals, including Social Forces, Social Problems, the Sociological Quarterly, Sociology of Race and Ethnicity, Urban Studies, Ethnic and Racial Studies, and many, many more. It has also been featured in hundreds of news articles across a wide array of outlets, legislative hearings, presidential speeches, and federal and local bills. Please welcome to Politics in Black, Ms. Jania Howell. Welcome,
Hi, nice
Jania.
to be here with you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your Sunday both. We have been looking forward to this conversation all week, ever since we knew that you were going to be here, because we got a lot to dig into. Jania.
Hi, Dr. Junior.
Oh yeah,
How you doing?
please say hello to each other. Absolutely.
Hi, Jessica. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a minute since I've seen Dr. Howell. So hi, Junior.
Yes, it has. Likewise.
Junior, we had a little back and forth before the show, and I had some questions that I want to start with you just real quickly, because we just heard in the first segment from some residents in New Orleans who were impacted by Hurricane Ida, as we know, a big Category 4 national or natural disaster. You have a different sort of take on natural disasters or natural hazards. So could you talk a little bit about your definition of natural disasters, how often they occur, and what exactly you consider to be a natural disaster? And does the current pandemic count as one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. Thank you for that. And I was listening in, and just, my heart goes out to everyone still suffering from Ida and all of its compounding disasters, including the people who are just on. It is so hard to hear those stories and just really feel the depth of pain that is so present. But when we think about disasters, we often go to those big moments, right? The Idas, the Katrinas, the Hurricane Harveys, the hurricanes that hit, like Hurricane Maria that hit Puerto Rico recently, the big earthquake that LA is waiting for, right? Yes. Or even the California fires. I mean, you all are living it and feeling the pervasiveness of that kind of disaster and what we often call a natural disaster. Mm-hmm. But in kind of academic terms, but also in government terms, the events that cause destruction are a lot more pervasive and a lot more throughout our whole country than we often realize. So I have a map, if it's easy to pull it up, if you're looking at this visually on YouTube, you can see that when we kind of combine disasters across the country over time, we see that almost every single county experiences some kind of weather-related climate event that creates destruction, that affects both crops and land and property, as well as people's own lives, people dying. And so our federal government has definitions in which they kind of define what's a hazard and then what's a presidential disaster. And those are specific levels that really become political things of how much aid you can get. Okay. But in reality, it's a much more pervasive kind of term and way of thinking about things in our world that are affecting our lives. And I think another thing that's really important to think about is that when it comes to natural disasters, a lot of the academic world is starting to push back on the word natural, because that term has really been used to separate ourselves from it and be like, this is something that is outside of our control. That's just, the world is kind of crashing down on us. And that's often how we think about it. And in some ways that's true, but a lot of social scientists like myself will show that actually the disaster part is the human part of it. It's both the climate change that we have affected, as well as the way that we're building, as well as the way we're responding to these events, these weather-related events in particular, that create these disasters. And so when it comes to the pandemic, the same thing is true. We're talking about specific weather-related events, which is often what people think about when they use the word natural disaster. The pandemic is obviously not a weather-related event. But when it comes to how we respond and the ways in which it's unfolding in our communities, there are so many similarities. And as Chauncey can speak to, there's tons of overlap in who actually is responding to it and how that's happening. And so in that way, these things are so similar and they're compounding on each other. And we're seeing the same inequalities unfold over and over again.
Yeah, let's talk about that response real quick, Chauncey, because you have a background in emergency management, I believe in Florida and in Georgia. So you're at ground zero when these sorts of things hit. Can you talk to us about what you see from your perspective as far as what Jania was talking about, the inequalities or the inequities in disaster relief and response?
Well, that's a great question. And as we spoke before, Dr. Junia has been a leader in this area, this lane of disaster research. What we have seen as emergency managers and what I've seen as an emergency manager over my 20 plus year career has been really that people of color, those who are from lower socioeconomic statuses, those who have, who are located in rural areas, and those who we might consider as not a part of the white, more affluent sector of our population. All of those groups, including those with disabilities, experience disaster very differently. The impact is disproportionate. The response is often biased. Even in humanitarian relief, there's bias in allocation of resources and who receives assistance post-disaster. In addition, when it comes to disaster recovery, those very groups that I just mentioned tend to have a longer time recovering if they recover from the disaster at all. And so we are our organization is really pushing the needle on understanding disaster equity, understanding that there must be more diversity within the field of emergency management so that we can diversify perspectives.
Yes.
The populations and the people that we are serving are diverse. And the demographics of the United States is changing. So it really makes sense to begin to focus on diversity and how our policies, our practices, the programs that are being created, how they can become more inclusive, and how all of these groups that have been historically excluded from being a part of the disaster planning and mitigation funding, how they can become a part of the resilience process. And so that's really something that's going to be critical, especially as the climate crisis continues, as we see more pandemics, wildfires, floods, hurricanes, everything. We know that those most vulnerable groups are going to be disproportionately impacted. And so we have to begin to prioritize equity now.
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to share, if I could, with Chauncey, a story that happened here, like in real life. In Los Angeles, we're an earthquake town, right? Supposedly we're going to fall into the Pacific Ocean at some point with the big one.
I'm going to be gone before that happens.
But as Californians, that's something you live with and and you hope you survive. But in any event, the city of Los Angeles does actually have an emergency management department with the city. And in order to do preparedness, they did a video. And in the video, it kind of opens with Mayor Garcetti and he's at his home, and visually we see all these people be saved, right? And there was not a black family. There was a dog that was saved. There were old people. There were, you know, different ethnicities. There was one black guy in the video as a worker, like as a worker for the city, saving someone else.
Yeah.
But there was not a visual of a black family unit being saved in that thing. And so it was going through all the different neighborhood councils, and it got to our neighborhood council, and we were like, who wrote this? And why did y'all let this out? And why didn't anybody notice that there wasn't a black family? And so can you just talk to, in terms of management, right? Because someone made a managerial decision to let that fly. Can you talk about in your work how you get stakeholders to actually push for these changes, whether it's at a municipality level, a state level? How can we actually advocate for ourselves to push some of the things that you're talking about?
Well, one of the things, and I've heard that kind of experience that you just described several times over. And I'm sure, you know, all of us have experienced some level of exclusion in representation on video and in, you know, all of the ads and things like that in terms of preparation for a disaster. That's unfortunate because City of Los Angeles is one of the more diverse cities in the country. So to really correct that kind of oversight, we provide cultural competency training to first responders and to those who are deploying to disasters. In addition, we work very hard to train the emergency management workforce in understanding diversity and understanding its value and understanding the prioritization of equity. What you're seeing there is bias. Oftentimes we identify with groups that look like us, that do the things that we do, and that, you know, go to the same type of worship, house of worship. And so you begin to have, when you go to work creating these videos, if everyone around the table looks like you and they do the same things that you do, it's difficult to interrupt that mindset if you haven't been trained to mitigate your own bias and if you're not aware of your own bias. And many times people are just not aware of it, but other times it is intentional. Yeah. I mean, I've heard things in the Emergency Operations Center where after Katrina, you know, they were saying, if it was me, I wouldn't give them another red cent. All they're going to do is buy a 40 ounce with it. They've said things, you know, I've heard all kinds of things. Yeah. And these are the people that are supposedly coming in to help.
Yeah. Yes, all help is not good help, apparently. I want to switch to Jania.
Yeah. Can I ask a quick question, Jania? Because, you know, here as reparationists, we are, you know, very focused on wealth inequality, and we have the racial wealth gap as a target, you know, for closure. That is our core, you know, focus and goal. And I want to kind of get down to brass tacks when we talk about these natural disasters, because what I heard from you is that they're more pervasive than we know, than we believe, or that is readily visible. They are growing in frequency and severity over time as we talk about climate change, and they are striking our communities. And as we heard in the first segment, we are being locked out of a lot of the relief and response as in the first segment, Chauncia just let us know. So you did some interesting research. Could you talk to us about how these disasters are impacting the racial wealth inequality that already exists in this country?
Yeah, absolutely. And to kind of transition there, like, you know, Chauncia was just talking about bias, which is real, like so real. And if we've been in any workplaces, we know it's real. And then you're in a workplace, when we're talking about emergency management, that is heavily male and heavily white male in particular. And so all that bias is really real, but it's also structural bias. It's how the very industry of emergency management came about. It's not just the people sitting around the table, it's our national government's conception of who should be quote unquote saved and what is it that we're saving. And we see that when we look at these bigger picture quantitative work. So let me summarize really quick what I mean by this bigger picture quantitative work, and then I can dive into some of those mechanisms if that's helpful. Absolutely. So me and a handful of co-authors on different papers, I've done a lot of quantitative work with different people on this, started now several years ago, really trying to get a bigger picture of how disasters were affecting people over time. So we know as scholars that it is more pervasive, that it's increasing, that it's happening all over the place. But often when it's studied, it's still studied like the news media covers it. And that's going in and like looking really in depth at one case study, like looking at New Orleans, which can be really helpful and really important. But that doesn't really give us a comparison or a way to say, like, what is the disaster doing itself? So I have access to some national restricted data, and we are the first people to connect that national longitudinal restricted data to data on disasters. Okay. And so by doing that, we were able to actually identify the impact of the disasters on people's lives over time. And we've looked at different outcomes, but like my baby, the thing I care about because I'm trained as a race scholar and do race work across different topics was wealth. And I wanted to see, like, you know, we know the racial wealth gap is really real. And we know that disasters are disproportionately affecting particularly Black and Indigenous communities. So how is that affecting their wealth over time?
Yes.
And so creating, you know, big fancy stats models, which is like my thing. So not to go into all the nerdy elements of it, but basically trying to create it, not trying, what we're doing statistically is we are comparing as best as we can, apples to apples, oranges to oranges, that kind of conception, where we're looking at people who are really similar, their family demographics are similar, their wealth is similar, you know, where they live is similar, all those kind of things, but some of them experience disasters and others don't. And in fact, some of them experience a lot of disasters compiled on top of each other and others don't. And we traced over time, over a decade of data, how that affected their wealth. And the first huge surprising thing is, like, when you just look at the whole nation overall, those who lived through the biggest disasters actually made more wealth than everybody else, which is not at all what we were expecting. I mean, you look at the effects of something like Katrina or Ida or Harvey or a huge earthquake or a fire, and things are just destroyed. So how in the world are those people making more wealth? So of course the question becomes, like, is it everybody? And is that part of the story? And so then we're looking across different axes, and as none of your listeners would be surprised about, the one that matters most is race. And when we look across race, we see that white people, particularly if we're looking from an intersectional perspective, white people who are educated, who have high socioeconomic status, who are in family units that are deemed the normalic family units of our nation, so heterosexual couples, all those kind of privileges that are government privileges, those people are the ones making money off of disasters. They literally are getting wealth the bigger and more disasters they live through. Now, don't get me wrong, like, they still can have trauma. It still can be a horrifying experience. I don't want anyone to live through disaster, but the mechanisms of recovering from that and how the system is set up is actually getting them more money at the end of the day. And then inversely, particularly Black residents, again, if you look from an intersectional perspective, so Black residents who have less education or less socioeconomic status, you're going to see even a bigger inequality. Not only are they not getting wealth, they're losing wealth. And so they're losing wealth compared to their Black counterparts. So Black, similarly educated, people who start with the same amount of wealth, all that kind of stuff, who live somewhere where they didn't live through disaster. So they're losing even more, which means that the racial wealth gap is actually growing just because of the disasters. And then we can throw in a model. That's stat speak of, like, what I'm doing with coding, but, like, throwing in the model FEMA aid, and actually not just looking at the disaster, but how our government is responding to that. And we see that our government's role in it is actually making that inequality even greater. So how much inequality are we talking about? Like, what are the brass tacks numbers? Well, there's national averages. Happy to go into those, but to bring it home, we can use this national model and then estimate per county approximately how much racial wealth gap has grown in the last 2 decades because of natural disasters. So in LA, the wealth gap between families, particularly between white and Black families, has approximately grown $72,000 just because of the natural disasters. So obviously racial wealth gap is growing in our nation for all sorts of reasons, for housing, for all different policies, all of which I study and, like, look at, but just the natural disaster piece is growing it on average that big. So this is a large contribution to how racial wealth gaps are growing and what we're seeing unfolding in communities across our country.
Jania, I got to stay with you because you did a lot of historical context around that. Just please dive in and give us, 2 minutes of historical context of why this is happening.
Yeah, our audience understands redlining.
Yes.
But it's almost like the redlining is compiled on top of the disaster, and it feeds into each other, causing that gap to grow. So if you could really just get into that, because Chad and I did our research, and your videos on YouTube, and it is amazing research.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, historical context is a huge piece of this. I study historical context all the time, both in things like housing and redlining, but also emergency management itself. Like, so how is this segment of our government so racist? I mean, all of our government is really racist, but this segment, as Chancia was talking about, is particularly racist. And part of that is the demographics, but it's also, again, because the root of this idea of what emergency management is rooted both in preserving property, which, I mean, again, I don't need to say to any of your listeners, property in our country has always been defined and conditioned around whiteness. And what I mean by that is that, you know, at the core of our country, property was land that was taken and stolen from the indigenous tribes, as well as people who were stolen from the continent of Africa. And those two things were equitably property. Sorry, my bad.
It's okay.
I'm just gonna get on my soapbox.
No, you're going great. Just, you know, we like to recognize the transatlantic slave trade, which was sellers and buyers. But go ahead, continue, please.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. Just rolling with it.
Yeah.
So, you know, these notions of restoring it in an economic sense and not restoring life, right? It's not about restoring people's livelihoods or their families or their well-being. It's the core of this industry has always been about restoring what is making money. And our definitions of money are also like steeped in what I would consider racial capitalism, or conceptions of capital that are racialized would be another way of kind of thinking about that. So in the practical sense, like, how is this actually happening? There's a few components. And I would like to know, before I like break those components down, that I think it's obviously super important to think about these histories, to think about how redlining, how different policies happened and created these systems. But the more we talk about them in the past tense, I think the more we distance ourselves from the reality that they're still happening.
Yes.
The key components of redlining were never outlawed in the Fair Housing Law. And those key components included how we appraise land, how we evaluate things. There is nothing officially made illegal about that racialized system in our fair housing. And so those policies are still happening and the gaps are growing. And similarly with emergency management, there's a lot of historical components, but it's also a very contemporary thing. And if we don't reckon with that it's a contemporary thing, we don't face the reality of our collective responsibility in changing it now, and not just facing up to the past, which obviously we also need to do. So what are those mechanisms that are happening now? One of the big ones is property, because again, the entire industry is set up about restoring property. And so because of that, it's all created to evaluate how much a property would be worth in the eyes of the market, really, and then giving aid according to that. And so because we live in a racialized housing market, and because of redlining and the contemporary redlining of evaluating homes based on who lives in the space, and that is still a legal practice, that means that homes in communities of color are deemed less valuable, which means they can get less aid when it comes to very similar damage. So that base understanding of what we're restoring and how we're restoring it is fundamentally racialized and fundamentally kind of creating these very huge, deep inequalities in the actual distribution of aid that we see today.
Couldn't we mitigate some of that with just, I mean, you're talking about fair market values, and this is California, right? A fixer-upper costs you $500,000.
$500, that's a deal.
I know, right? It is. At this point, it's moving towards $680. Like, here, it's really ridiculous. But the same, like, 1,100 square foot home, let's say in South LA, Spanish style, you know, the tiled roofs, West Side LA, same 1,100 square feet is like $1 million home, or $1.5 million home. Right. And so couldn't we use rebuild costing instead of fair market valuation? Because it's going to cost the same in South LA or West LA to actually rebuild the same thing. That way the wealth component is actually being equalized in real time.
Yeah, I agree. It's something I've advocated for. Absolutely. On top of that, another element that comes in when this happens is trying to evaluate what shape it might have been in pre-disaster. And so if an appraiser is coming in and trying to decide what might have been here before the disaster versus this disaster, you can just know how racial bias is going to play into that, and assumptions about the quality of the house, besides the deliberate racialized components, but like, oh, this roof was already in bad shape, right? So those kind of notions also layer on and don't necessarily get fixed with the rebuild value. So we need that, and like all these solutions, right, are multi-layered. Not that you're not saying that, but I'm just clarifying.
Yeah, no, building some building standard codes that are standard for a reason, and let's rebuild to that. Let's not just say you have this disaster with a leaky roof, so we're gonna give you valuation so that you can still have some sort of half leaky roof. Like, that makes no sense.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and so there's the property element, and then there's all sorts of other components within the policies as well. And your first segment was kind of getting at this stuff too, where a lot of the federal policies, but it's not just federal policies. FEMA doesn't work alone. FEMA always works in collaboration with the state and the local. So you were mentioning LA's emergency management. Cities have emergency managers, counties have emergency managers, states have emergency managers. And because we're in a federalist country, meaning that our federal government works with local units of government, there's this very interesting, from an equity perspective, and I'm using interesting in a derogatory way, relationship between these levels of power, where there's some good intentions about that, like the local community should be able to say what they need, but it also means, and again, this came up in your first segment too, that politicians have the power to declare if they need help or not. And so if local and state officials are not saying the local community needs help, they're not going to get the money from the federal government. So you have the multiple layers of bureaucracy that are determining who and what and how needs aid. And all of that aid, though, the federal and the state and the local, almost all of it is around the household. And so that's another way that we have institutionalized an idea of who should get aid, who qualifies as being in a household together, how's your papers work for being able to be in that household, what kind, besides just restoring property, what kind of aid you might need is based on what boxes you can check and how you're related to the other people you might or might not have been living with during the disaster. And I mean, I could go on and on and on, and I'm gonna stop there. But there are so many layers of how, on the specific side, policy, in the detailed way and in the big picture, that we have created a system that continues to privilege the privileged and disadvantage everyone who's been continually marginalized in our country.
Wow. Chauncey, I'm going to let you jump in, Chauncey. I'm sure you have something to add there.
I love to just hear Dr. Junior talk. She knows that I like to just sit there and listen to her.
She's on point. She's on point.
Chauncey, I have a question for you, because you're in the management part, right? And Dr. Junior, she certainly mentioned that in governance or in government, the managers for the most part are white male. And so in terms of, Biden has this whole new diversity plan and he wants his departments to go through all of this diversity stuff. I'm trying to get you work. Are you like some sort of NGO to come into our federal government to do this type of training? Because we've got to figure out how we can get you in there to bring more diversity into that space and equity, which you've been talking about here today.
Absolutely. Thank you, my sister. I appreciate that. That's always a challenge for nonprofit organizations led by people of color and led by women of color. We oftentimes, though we have all of the subject matter expertise, the certifications, all of the experience in the world, organizations within the federal government, state and local, still struggle with working with groups that are led by minorities. And it's really because, I find that there's still bias and a lot of racism and all the other isms that go into it. So we work extra hard within the Institute to partner as frequently as possible, as much as possible, to still get the work done. Organizations like FEMA, like HUD, and all of those great federal organizations that have been around a long time will still contract with white-led firms to do the same thing, and then those firms will reach out to us to actually complete the work.
Yes. Okay.
Now, it's I call it the Elvis Presley effect. It's the exploitation, absolutely exploitation.
That's right.
I work with a team of very diverse emergency managers who are also trained as equity strategists. And so what happens is we'll get a call from a firm that's got a great contract with FEMA or some other organization, a multi-million-dollar contract. And they'll say, but we know nothing about equity, but we've been contracted to do equity. So can we pay you a few thousand to do this work for us?
Which furthers the discrimination, the racism,
the
and the inequity, and the wealth inequality, inequality. You're getting pennies on the dollar and they're getting the whole dollar, and yet you're expected to deliver the work that they can't do at 90 to 100%.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens in disasters. The firms that come in to do to rebuild and to assess what infrastructure gets rebuilt first and who gets prioritized, those are all firms led by white males, and in some cases, white females. So very few people of color have been given those prime contracts.
So Lionel talked about everything sort of being digitized like now, right? Mm-hmm. Everything being digitized. There was no need for FEMA to come feet on the ground. So the question, we're advocates, right? So I'm asking the questions as an advocate because I'm like, who do we need to talk to? Mm-hmm. Who do we need to have, other representatives of our organization across the country talk to in order to change some of this? Because there are decision makers, and I absolutely know what you mean. I'm not going to name names, but I sat in on a meeting with Office of Money Budget Management about something that we were trying to do with the disaggregation of data, and it boiled down to the woman having a bad day at work. That is not my concern. Mm-hmm. I am here advocating for Black people about historic wrongs, and whether or not you have a bad day at work is irrelevant to the work that we're trying to do here. So how do we get in, and if these governmental bodies are interconnected, FEMA has to dial into the state has to dial in to a local, how do we start as advocates actually asking these questions? And I would say at the lowest hanging fruit would be the municipal level. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. At the municipal level, in Louisiana, we also do deployments to disasters. We have a disaster equity response team, and we go out and we look for discrimination in response and recovery. And I can tell you that it abounds. And so what you see is a local government basically that is representing a very diverse community, but the leader is not diverse and has no general desire to prioritize diversity or the needs of diverse communities. Mm-hmm. In Louisiana, I don't know that they have a single emergency manager that is an emergency management director. They don't have a single one. Mm-hmm. However, you're going to see that all these disasters happen over and over again, but not one person representing the African American race or the other demographics there. None of them are in positions of leadership. Yeah. Those positions make the decisions on who is contracted to come in after a disaster. Yeah. It also decides who's going to provide cultural competency training. I just, met with a resident in Louisiana, and, she said 8 white men showed up at her door with guns and said they were from search and rescue. Jeez. Now, we provide that, that training to let, these responders know that whenever you're dealing with a city or a parish or county that's had tremendous cultural issues in relation to the government, we have to be sensitive to those issues. Mm-hmm. And we have to be respectful. Mm-hmm. So while you may feel the need to bring guns into an African American community, we know that it would be best if they weren't visible and if you had diversity on your team, especially if you're going into a predominantly African American neighborhood. Yes. So it's things like that. Yeah. The decision makers, really have to make a decision to prioritize and commit to equity, but also we have to form a coalition together to say that we're going to really promote organizations like IDEA to come in and do the work rather than having us sub to a disaster firm that's led by people who have no general interest in the communities they're serving.
Yeah. Now, the story you just told me sounds like just basic human sensitivity and decency to understand and understand what these folks are going through, not showing up at their doors with guns, you know, making demands. So thank you for sharing that. We've got about 2 minutes left here. And I just, you know, we talked a little bit about solutions, Dr. Junia. I wanted to give you just a minute or so just to talk about any other solutions that you've identified that can help us address this growing inequality and specifically wealth that we're seeing post-disasters or post-natural disasters.
Yeah, thanks. Also, Chauncey is always so kind about my work. And so I want to turn the tables because she's not quite tooting her own horn quite enough, because people in the Biden transition team, in the administration, like Chauncey is extremely well connected in FEMA and in the federal government, and people are calling her. And not only is the inequality of big firms getting the real dollars and IDM only getting a few thousand, there are countless times where Chauncey is just graciously giving free advice to everyone and their mother, including the federal government and our administration over and over. And that isn't turning into, I mean, it's not that they're not using her ideas, because they are, and they're brilliant ideas, but it's not turning into the kind of contract work that it is for other people. And so Chauncey and Curtis Brown started IDM, and they are extremely well known. Like everywhere I go in this world, like everyone mentions them, and they're just extremely talented. And so I know this is not really a question you asked me, but Friday, and what you were saying, like you have a perfect example with this video that y'all just saw. And I mean, it would be an amazing opportunity to use a social media campaign or an on the ground campaign to put that back in the face, maybe a slightly kind or not way, to your local emergency managers and say, this is a problem. Here is an organization who could come in and do consulting.
Absolutely.
We ask you, we demand that you hire them and have them do an audit of what you guys are doing and help you think about your PR, help you think about who you're hiring and the policies that you're creating here in our own city. And I think that's an amazing moment to have that evidence that you know that they're not meeting the mark, and there are organizations who could do that, and IDM would be an amazing one. So anyways,
thank you for that. Thank you for that,
propping her aside, the other really quick, I know we're almost out of time. I think the other piece that I just want to say on the reparations side, like when we think about reparations, often I hear a lot of people thinking about this as a past thing. And the word, though, it's not just a historical element. The reparations is about dealing with injustice, dealing with the wrongs. And that is a contemporary thing. There are wrongs that have been done decade, year after year after year. And so in California, we have this opportunity to push this task force to think about it, you know, really asking both the local emergency management, state management, and FEMA, and this slice of the equation, where's the data? They have the data. They don't want to give it out often. Like, trust me, I fight about data with government agencies all the time. But where is this money gone? Like, let's put the money on the table, see where it's gone in California when it comes to emergency management. And then we need repair. We need some level of equity for the last 5 years, 10 years of how this money has been spent. And we need promises, not only to repair the past, but mechanisms to address this going forward. And there's lots of ways, from all the specific kind of policies we were talking about earlier to big picture reimaginings of how we do disaster aid that is less about property and less about checking all the boxes and doing bureaucracy, and more about how can we just make sure that we get the cash and the resources to the people who need them when they need them, as quick as they need them, and not trying to make sure that no one's cheating the system or no one who shouldn't get it has it. When that's our motive, to like check everyone, of course we're going to see things being delayed and inequalities appearing.
Awesome.
That was a word right there, Dr. Junia. Thank you for that.
And so, ladies, we are out of time, and we thank you.
We're going to stay connected. We're going to stay connected.
We will be rolling what you have told us here today into our advocacy. Social media handles really quickly, and then we have to transition.
Hey, well, IDEUM, follow us on Twitter at IDEUM_global. And also the same thing on Instagram.
Thank you so much, Chauncia.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Howell. Thank you. Thank you both.
Dr. Howell, quickly, social media?
Biggest way to see what my work is and get a hold of me is my personal website, which is myfirstandlastname.com. Thank you guys so much.
Awesome. Thank you both for being here. This has been so informative, and the family has learned something. I've learned something, so thank you again. And we're gonna be in touch because we need to work. We need more of this information.
We definitely do. Thank you, ladies.
Thanks. Have a good night.
You too.
Yep.
Okay, family. So again, anything that you give today will be going to our guests. I want to read this very quickly. Reverend Robert Turner has held down a 3-year public protest to cure the harms done by the city of Tulsa during the Greenwood Massacre of 1921. There were 10,000 Black people in Greenwood. 1,256 homes were destroyed, bodies buried in mass graves. On September 28, 2021, Pastor Turner and the historic Vermont African Methodist Episcopal Church will finally have its day in court. Please sign Dr. Turner's petition at change.org. It's entitled Reparations for 1921 Tulsa, and it is 1,000 signatures away from its goal of 35,000 signatures. Sign the petition, share the petition with the hashtag Tulsa We Win. Thank you so much.
Sign the petition, fam. And while you're at it, like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell. You heard, we're trying to help the family. So if you can donate today, please donate on the Cash App or Venmo, NAASDLA. We're going to run a quick promo, and we're coming back with the Vice Chair of the AB 3121 Task Force. Stick with us. We are back, family, and now it's time for our special reoccurring segment, Meet the AB 3121 Task Force, where we bring you the members of that task force so the public and the community can know who's working on this historic effort at the state level. So right now we're bringing in the vice chair of this task force, Dr. Amos C. Brown. And this is a man I wanted to speak to because he's a native of Jackson, Mississippi, so he's from my hometown. But he's known among world leaders, presidents, celebrities, and academics alike for his trademark activism, intellectual discipline, and masterful oratory. Dr. Brown is a legend in his own time, tutored by Medgar Evers, Benjamin Mays, Samuel Williams, J. Pius Barber, and Dr. Martin Luther King. In fact, he was taught by Dr. King at Morehouse College. Dr. Brown has never seen issues of society as separate from his mission of the church, especially when members of the church are directly affected by the systems of evil. In addition to his pastoral responsibilities, he served as a member of the governing board of the San Francisco Community College, national chairman of the National Baptist Commission on Civil Rights and Human Services, a member of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, chairman of the Bay Area Ecumenical Pastors Conference, sorry folks, first vice president of the California State Baptist Convention, president of the NAACP branch in San Francisco, and presently he serves as vice chair on the AB 3121 California Reparations Task Force. So please welcome to Politics in Black, Dr. Amos C. Brown.
Good evening, sir.
Dr. Brown, thank you for being here, sir.
Good afternoon and evening, nearly. I am very pleased and consider it an honor to share with you at this time about the need for the state, the nation, and the city of San Francisco to make amends and to show some reckoning of this long and dark, dismal past of oppression, injustices, and outright incivility that has been perpetrated against sons and daughters of Africa.
Oh.
And that's what this reparations task force, in my eyesight and my understanding, is about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm particularly not interested in a whole lot of studying. We've been studied too much.
Amen.
We have, as Dr. King said, made situations of paralysis of analysis.
Amen.
And now is the time for us to establish a plan, not a study, but a plan for reparations for all of the injustices and inequities that were perpetrated against Black people in this state of California.
Awesome. So, CJEC, the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California, actually helped to write in a special piece of language into AB 3121. They asked for special consideration for African Americans who are descendants of persons enslaved in the United States. The beneficiary class has really been and will continue to be a point of discussion, particularly for the descendant beneficiary community. What do you see as being the class and why? The beneficiary
I think
class.
we would have to quantify. If we're talking about California,
Mm-hmm.
we got to deal with the sins of California. And that can go back definitely in history
Mm-hmm.
to the 1850s when one Peter Burnett
Yep.
was governor of this state. Many people don't know it, but Peter Burnett was an arch racist.
Yep.
Came from Tennessee, was reared in Missouri, led the first wagon train westward in 1843. And one of the stipulations for participation in that wagon train was that no mulattoes or Blacks would be permitted to be a part of the wagon train.
Mm-hmm.
And if they were, they would have to be enslaved people. And when he got up to the Oregon Territory, what did he do when they settled that first town, Germantown? He issued an ordinance that specifically said no Blacks or mulattoes will be permitted to settle in this town. If they're caught here, they will be beaten every 6 months until they leave town.
Hmm.
And that was known as the Peter Burnett flogging law.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Well, lineage, when you go back to the 1850s, predating the Civil War, obviously is going to matter, and it's going to have to be significantly weighted as the state of California, per what you're saying here.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Brown, just real quick, because I've watched all three meetings so far, while I was supposed to be working, but I was watching y'all to have this discussion. But there's been a lot of talk about community engagement and a community engagement plan. And so, I think Commissioner Grills and Commissioner Task Force Member Holder have both put forward different community engagement plans.
Which was a CJEC idea, but continue.
Yeah, absolutely. CJEC's been involved. But I wanted to hear your point of view on community engagement. And if you could also tie that, because there was a little contentiousness between the task force and the Department of Justice that I heard on the last meeting. If you could talk a little bit about that as it ties into making sure that we get as many Black folks, as many Black Americans here in California engaged as possible in this process.
Let me say here, again repeating history, the civil rights movement that I participated in from the age of 15 down in Mississippi came from the bottom up, not from the top down.
Say it again, brother. Say it again. Say it again one more time. When you say something important, you got to repeat it.
Came from the bottom up and not top down.
Amen.
And I am not going to keep quiet over what I see happening by the Department of Justice, who are attempting to control to control
Mm-hmm.
the process.
Mm-hmm.
We are people of intellect, of integrity. We have a constituent base. That's the reason why we were chosen. And we are beholden to, in my understanding, my book, to the people.
Yep.
To the people.
That's how we feel here. Yeah.
So
absolutely.
you cannot have a report that represents truth and integrity if you're going to have the system that has already failed us, has been mean to us, controlling the process.
Mm-hmm.
And I will stand for that, and I will not keep quiet.
Mm-hmm.
I know that they have something at stake in this whole matter, but you don't dictate to Black folks who are of age.
That's right.
We are not children,
Yes, sir.
and we are not on a plantation.
That's right. That's right. Thank you for that, Dr. Brown, and thank you for standing strong in that position, because we need that from what I saw with the DOJ in that last meeting.
Solutions. That was your thing. So what, I mean, if you could have carte blanche and you could write it the way you want it to, what is it that you'd want to see as a reparations effort at the state level from California?
Well, I think number one, it may be obvious, but I repeat it, that we will remember that God gave us 2 eyes to see, 2 ears to hear, and 1 mouth to speak. And I feel that the task force needs to look and listen to the people. And after we have weighed what they've said, that we would come to common ground and put in a plan of action, a document that will have meat to it, that will be programmatic and scratch us where we itch.
Mm-hmm.
In areas of education, economic empowerment, health and wellness, cultural enclaves being re-established. Too many of our community enclaves, our watering holes, have been destroyed by programs such as redevelopment.
Mm-hmm.
In Los Angeles, in San Francisco, and in Oakland. When you rob a people of their heritage and you destroy their footing, you destroy them. Mm-hmm. And that's what this whole critical race theory is all about. These folks who are fighting it, they're fighting it because they don't want the truth to be told. What happened to us? They don't want the truth to be told of how we made it in spite of oppression by creating our communities that were once vibrant. And definitely in that area, you look at a place like Allensworth.
Yeah. Yes.
Colonel Allensworth.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Couldn't get water.
Yep.
Couldn't get water. In 1908,
yeah.
He did it. He had in mind replicating Tuskegee. That's what it was about when he sought to build that town. But racism and injustice fought against him. And consequently, he could not bring to pass that vision of Allentown. So that we need to consider that. And then we got to deal with this restorative justice and have quality program that will help us to make up for the lost time of this mass incarceration of African Americans.
Yes, absolutely.
In the correctional system and in the communities.
Yes.
And a lot of these re-entry programs that are in LA and Oakland and San Francisco are not led by capable Black people. You have whites who have made a cottage industry out of it, and they do not have the cultural sensitivity and the wherewithal to really connect with us and to be about a real quality, substantive, restorative justice program that will bring our brothers and sisters back to the community, back to families, back to our institutions, and really give us what we do deserve.
Yeah, absolutely, Dr. Brown. Thank you. That was powerful. I wanted to also talk to you a little bit about the connectivity between what you're doing here in the state of California and the federal effort, or HR 40. So one of our board members, Tiffany Quarles, here with NAASDLA, called in during public testimony, and she let the task force know that here at NAASD, we have actually submitted an executive order to the Biden administration that he could sign to convene a federal reparations task force, just as the California reparations task force has been convened, because California is moving way out ahead of the federal government right now. I'd like to get your thoughts on how California and what you are involved in and engaged in now can inform and influence the federal effort, and do you think an executive order from President Biden is appropriate?
I think it's time that Brother Biden act on his language of having the Black communities back.
So when you say something important, you got to say it again, Dr. Brown. Say that again.
I think it's time that Brother Biden show that he has some good manners and delivers on his statement.
Amen. Amen.
That he had the Black communities back. Right now, I answer your question, but right now, it should not be that they will be in, I would call, an argument about whether or not we should get rid of this filibuster. We can't even get a voting rights bill. We can't get a police bill. The infrastructure bill has not come through. The Democrats and Mr. Biden have got to stand up and show that they have balls, so to speak. And I'm saying that as a preacher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And say to this xenophobic, nationalistic, autocratic mindset that's been put afoot in this nation, this virus of fascism, that's what's lurking at the door. And the Democrats better wake up if they want to save the soul of this democracy.
That's right, because 2022 is right around the corner, sir.
Right around the corner.
We paying attention.
And they have put in action all of these suppression bills, those Republicans. And they're just trying to lay the groundwork for confusion, anarchy in 2022 to also push it into 24, that this right-wing, undemocratic, unprincipled, unholy politic can get a foot in this nation.
Well,
if they would just read history, look at what happened in Nazi Germany. It's the same mentality. It was the same attitude. Look at what happened down in Mississippi.
Yeah.
When blacks were disenfranchised and could not vote. Even old Theodore G. Bilbo, who was in the Senate, bragged about how he paid people to be hit persons, to go after any black who dared to register and vote in Mississippi.
Yeah.
And they had such draconian measures as saying, in order for a black person to register and vote, you would have to swear to, that you would be against an anti-lynching bill. That was in 1946.
Jesus.
That such happened in our native state of Mississippi.
Yeah.
And also it said, you must swear that you support our Southern way of life. And that you also must pay a poll tax.
So they must repair the Negro to repair America.
Yeah, and we need Biden.
Right.
We need Biden to sign off on that executive order.
He needs to really do it.
Yeah.
He needs to stand up and be counted, and not think that you're ever going to win over these people who are the embodiment of evil.
Yes.
That's
absolutely.
it.
The actions of evil is not over there in the Middle East.
Absolutely.
Evil and terror happens in this nation as we speak.
Absolutely.
It definitely happened in 1963 when those 4 little babies, those 4 little girls were bombed to get to death at 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham.
Yes. Yes, sir. Yes,
and
sir.
when Emmett Till was lynched,
Yes, sir.
that was terror. So don't come to me talking about we got to keep people out of this country because we don't want terrorists coming here. That's not what they're about. It's about white privilege, white entitlement, and white control.
Amen.
And that's the reason why they're making every effort to disenfranchise the Black community. But the Biden administration must not give ear to that kind of sentiment.
Absolutely.
Respect the people, yes, but let them know in no uncertain terms. And the faith community needs to know this. These so-called white evangelicals, they don't know a thing about Jesus. They are about money, about militarism, and materialism, and racism. And
Amen.
it's time that America do more than just have "in God we trust," saying that we are a Christian nation.
That's right.
It must be put into concrete action. And as Sweet Daddy Gray said so eloquently during his lifetime, they must tangibilitate.
Tangibilitate. I got a new word, y'all. Tangibilitate.
I like that, Dr. Brown. I apologize, but we're running out of time here.
We're gonna have to have you back.
We're gonna have to bring you back for a part 2 because you was spitting nothing but fire right here, and I got to hear more of this. But sir, thank you so much for coming here today. Thank you for the work that you're doing on this task force.
Yes, sir.
You are a bedrock in that group. And your vision is helping guide something that is going to be tangible. What is tangibilitate?
Tangibilitate.
Tangibility. It's going to be tangible and tangibilitate. And I see that happening. So thank you, sir. But we're going to have to bring you back. Real quick, if folks want to connect with you, how can they connect with you?
They can connect with me at Dr. That's all lowercase, one word, Amos C. Brown. No period behind the DR or the middle initial C.
Okay.
At Third Baptist, third is spelled out, .org.
All right,
Dr.
brother.
Amos C. Brown at thirdbaptist.org.
Well, thank you, Dr. Brown. Thank you so much.
They may call me at 415-559-2978. 415-559-2978.
Thank you, Dr. Brown, so much. I'm gonna try to catch you. I'm gonna try to catch you at Third Baptist if I'm in San Francisco, and next time you're in Jackson, Mississippi, we're gonna have to get together. So
God bless you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. You have a great day.
Thank you. So we have wrapped another one. To our audience, thank you so much for being here with us. As we come back, we'll have a Power Pack show next month. Thank you, and
that's it.
Good night.
Peace, fam.
We're going out. Peace and blessings to civil rights advocate Bob Moses. Respect to the TBC band playing I Don't F With You, Don't F With Me. All right, y'all.
Before we leave, much love to Dana Dane on the production team. She has had a rough go the past couple of weeks. Dana, we love you. And that's it. We done.